Hello, everybody. This is Gregory with 5-Minute Catholic Apologetics, where 5 minutes of your time it may get you to the divine. Today, we're going to talk about a retort to those who don't go to the Latin Mass because they don't understand what's going on at the Latin Mass and don't understand why people would be going to the Latin Mass at all. Now, before we begin, let's start with a prayer. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Gloria Patri et Filii et Spiritui Sancto, secutor in principio et nunc et semper et seculi seculorum. Amen. Now, I do know people who are like this. As I've mentioned, if you have been listening to this show or this YouTube channel for the year and a half it's been out, I do go to Latin Mass on occasion. My main parish is an ordinariate of the chair at St. Peter, which I colloquially will say it's an Anglican liturgy, but it's definitely in the USCCB, the bishop of the ordinary, Bishop Lopes, is part of the USCCB, so it's not some fringe Sedevacantist group. But I do go to Latin Mass on occasion. I do my daily Masses at a pretty traditional, regular Novus Ordo parish. But there are people who are like, I don't understand why people go to Latin Mass. You don't understand what's going on. Da, 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 da. And just a couple of things here. And I will say, and I will end this video on the two types of people I think that go to Latin Mass, and one group of that group I would admonish to a certain extent. Now, why do some people go to Latin Mass? First of all, would I go to a Latin Mass if I lived in a town that had a Latin Mass that was in a nice church? Maybe. I don't know. I don't have that. I live outside of a town that has 1.3 million people, and we don't have a Latin Mass. We have an SSPX chapel that's very small. And then there is one Latin Mass on the other side of town that's in a very modern looking church. So that's why I say, if we had like an FSSP or FSP here in an old church, would I go to that? Maybe. I don't know. I really haven't thought about it because that's not happening anytime soon. FSP isn't going to be building a church over here anytime soon. So why do people go to Latin Mass? I think there's a couple of things that you could respond to this way. I think there's some people who go to it because they just like the liturgy. They like the reverence of the liturgy. They like the solemnity of the liturgy. They like the music, the simplicity of the music of the liturgy. They like the incense and the other kind of accoutrement, as we would say, that's connected to the Latin Mass. Some would go because they understand it's part of our patrimony, it's part of our legacy, the Latin Mass, at least in the Latin Rite, the western part of Europe, and then all the expansion through the Western nations, through all around the world. It's our patrimony. We've had the Latin Mass in some form. I mean, really, you could go back to some apocryphal reports that Peter and the early disciples were doing a Latin Mass in Rome in the 60s AD. Paul, that's what they were both martyred. So there's a chance that they were doing their proto-liturgies. And yes, Protestants, we have an episode here how they were doing, we had the Mass before the New Testament was even written. They were doing some sort of proto-liturgy. You can see this in 1 Corinthians 11, where Paul talks about receiving the Eucharist now in a state of grace. But certainly, I think you could say we've had a Latin Mass in almost the same form it is in now. It's for at least 1,700 years. And we've had the exact same Latin Mass since Pius V revised the Missal back in the 1560s or so. So almost about 500 years. We've had the same Mass. So there are people that go to the Latin Mass because they want to be connected to that history. They want to go to the Latin Mass because the Latin Mass is the Mass of Padre Pio, is the Mass of Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross. It's the Mass of St. Ignatius. I know I just mentioned 3 Spaniards. It's the Mass of Thomas Becket. It's the Mass of just fill in the blank, St. Bridget, St. Catherine of Siena. Same reason why I do my rosary in Latin. It's not that I think it's illegitimate in English. I just like doing things in Latin because it connects me to our heritage. It connects me to the people that martyred themselves or for the faith, or just what generation in and out carried on their faith to the next generation. Now, that's what I would tell people about, like, why are people in the Latin Mass? I would say most people go there because they just like those two things. Now, there are people that will go to the Latin Mass, whether it be FSP, SSPX, Institute of Christ the King, or whatever. And there's even just normal dioceses, archdioceses that will continue, despite the motu proprio a year ago, to do a Latin Mass. I've been to a Latin Mass in Houston that was a Novus Ordo Latin Mass. It was not the 1962 Missal. It was just, they just translated the words into Latin. Whatever. So I think there's two groups of people. And the same thing, we have an episode on should you listen to Sedevacanus or even SSPX content. SSPX is not Sedevacanus, let's be clear. And let's say you have an SSPX church in your town, and it's the only Latin Mass you have. If you go to that Mass because you like the Latin liturgy, you like the music and all the aforementioned, that is perfectly fine. Now, if you're going to a Latin Mass as some sort of rebellion or refusal to the current pontificate or the pontificate since 1958, some sort of act of defiance against the spirit of Vatican II and the new Novus Ordo Mass that was rolled out in 1970, and or you are a Sedevacanus, then I would take issue to that, because look, you are essentially doing what's so contrary to the spirit of Catholicism. Catholicism means universal. Catholicism is accepting all people and even all types of liturgy. Now, a lot of Sedevacanus will say that the words of consecration have changed in the Novus Ordo Mass, whether it be in English or Portuguese or Spanish. I don't know, it's above my pay grade. I don't have the hubris and pride to tell you right or wrong either way. There are certainly people that have no problem with hubris and will tell you for sure that they know that the words of consecration have changed or the church is in mass apostasy. I don't know. I'm just a dude in Texas. But I will say that if you go to a Latin Mass and you have this spirit of we know the truth, we are part of the remnant, all the other Catholics are stupid, are going to go to hell, they're not receiving the sacrament because they don't have valid priests, blah, 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 blah. I'd say you're no different than the Gnostics of the 3rd century, or the Manichaeans later on, or fundamentalists, especially Protestant, radical Protestant fundamentalists, right? The 10th Baptist Church on Main Street. They have that mindset. Everyone is damned, especially if you come from the Reformed mindset, the Reformed liturgy, Reformed tradition, I should say, like Calvinism. I mean, that is very prevalent over there. We're the true church. Everyone else is damned. They don't know the truth. I'm Neo from the Matrix movies. I've been given this divine information, everyone else is in the wrong. Then I would admonish you, like brothers and sisters, to have some humility regarding that. And I would tell you, examine your thoughts. Any of you who are Sedevacanists, and this is not a time or a place to debate Sedevacanism, I would just tell you, practice some humility. And I would tell you that the Latin Mass is beautiful, and if any of you have never gone to one, I would go to one. Find one, go to it. There are people that travel hours on Sundays to go to one. I think it's a beautiful liturgy. Go to it. But I would tell you that if you are one of those who goes to the Latin Mass as some sort of refutation of post-conciliar church, or you don't even recognize any of the popes as the true popes, I would just be very careful. We have episodes here on traditionalism. Just be very careful and practice a modicum of modesty. Guys, post in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Hit the notification, subscribe, and share button. Until next time, take care. God bless and pray.